A family is spending their vacation on a yacht in the Caribbean Sea, and everything about the day is exactly what a holiday should feel like, warm and easy and completely removed from the rest of the world, and the mother Julia decides to go for a swim and drops into the water and starts moving through it, and then she feels something, a presence she cannot see or name, and she looks around and finds nothing and decides she is imagining things. And then it comes back, and this time she starts swimming back toward the yacht, and before she reaches it something grabs her leg and pulls, and she starts screaming. Her daughter Cassie is on the deck with her headphones on and hears nothing, and her husband Tom and her son Ben are on the other side of the boat fishing and do not notice either, and Julia is fighting to keep her head above the water and screaming until the water fills her mouth and the sound barely comes out. And eventually Tom looks up and realizes he has not seen Julia in a while and scans the water and finds her in trouble, and he takes the yacht toward her and jumps in and reaches her and holds her up and swims them both back, and the kids help pull them aboard, and Julia sits there shaking and tells them it must have been a current even though it did not feel like one. That night the family gathers to celebrate Ben's birthday with cake and gifts and the kind of warmth that makes the earlier moment feel far away, and Cassie slips outside with her laptop to video call her boyfriend, and during the call he turns the screen to show her the sky above the city which is filled with enormous dark clouds unlike anything she has seen before, and then the call cuts out completely, and Cassie goes back inside and tells her family what she saw, and Tom says they are too far from land for a reliable signal and leaves it at that. Right then a noise from outside pulls them all to the deck and they find a large group of whales moving past, and Tom explains that whales follow the Earth's magnetic field to navigate and that when something disrupts that field the animals get confused and begin tracking storm patterns toward the coast instead, and before the conversation can go further the yacht shakes hard and Ben falls and Tom immediately decides to go underwater and check the hull. He comes back up with a fresh cut across his shoulder and a look on his face that tells everyone something is wrong, and Julia stitches the wound while Tom explains that he felt something large moving behind him in the water and turned toward it and the propeller caught him, and whatever was down there was big enough to sense before it could be seen, and the damage to the hull is serious enough that they cannot keep moving without help. And Julia works the radio through every channel while Cassie searches her phone for a signal and both of them find nothing. And while this is happening Ben puts on a mask and jumps out at Cassie from a doorway and gives everyone an extra scare on top of everything else. The engine eventually dies completely and the yacht sits still in the water, and Julia catches a faint voice on the radio but it is buried too deep in static to understand, and Tom tells the family they have 4 days of supplies and will have to wait for a passing boat. And then the radar picks something up and they go outside and watch the sky light up as what appear to be meteorites streak down and crash into the water around them sending enormous columns of water into the air, and one lands close enough that Tom tries to force the engine back to life out of instinct, and another hits nearby while the family holds onto each other, and then Tom looks more carefully and realizes the shapes falling from the sky are not meteorites, they are satellites coming down. And Ben notices smoke rising from the back of the yacht and Tom goes to look and the engine is completely destroyed. The wind picks up fast after that and the family gets inside and none of them notice the compass spinning in circles on the dashboard, and the waves build and Ben falls again and this time gets hurt, and Tom fights through the wind to reach the storage box outside and gets the life jackets back in for everyone, and the power cuts out and Tom finds the breaker and gets it back on. And when the lights return Ben sees blood running from Julia's nose and Julia is starting to feel dizzy, and Cassie makes it to the sink just in time. And the radio is producing nothing, and then a high-pitched sound moves through the hull and the wind reaches a level where the doors cannot hold and a hatch blows open and the windows start cracking, and Tom lights a flare before everything goes dark. They wake the next morning to silence, and the yacht is battered but they are alive, and they go outside expecting open water and find dry ground in every direction as far as they can see, and the ocean is simply gone, and the yacht is sitting on the exposed seafloor. And they stand there looking at it trying to understand what they are seeing. Cassie tries her phone and gets nothing. And Ben finds 2 dead crabs on the ground and turns them over in his hands, and Tom checks the compass and it is reading backwards, and he tells the family the last time the magnetic poles reversed like this was over 700,000 years ago, and Cassie breaks completely when she understands what that means for her boyfriend and goes to find somewhere to be alone, and when Julia follows her Cassie closes the door. Julia and Tom go through the supplies to see what survived and Ben ties his birthday balloons to a nearby rock hoping someone might spot them from far away, and Tom works the radio until he reaches a man named No, the captain of a submarine that is also sitting grounded somewhere out there on the exposed seafloor, and No confirms the poles have reversed and the oceans pulled back and flooded over the land masses instead, and he has not found any other survivors and most communication is down, and his instruments tell him the poles will reverse again within a week and the sea will return. But when it does it will come back violently and everyone needs to be as high as possible, and his co-captain did not survive the crash and the submarine has room for 3 people, and Julia and Tom ask him to take their children, and No gives them his coordinates, and Tom calculates it will take 2 to 3 days on foot to reach the submarine and tells everyone to sleep because they are leaving at first light. In the morning while the family is packing, Tom notices movement nearby and watches a man approach them, limping and carrying a makeshift harpoon with a dog beside him, and Tom goes out and offers him water and the man drinks and then swings the bottle into Tom's face and kicks him down, and Julia comes running and gets there too late because the man is already driving the harpoon into Tom's stomach, and Tom goes still very quickly, and the man cuts his throat to finish it, and then he comes after Julia, and he throws the harpoon and it opens a gash across her shoulder, but she keeps moving and gets back to the yacht and finds the children and tells them to hide and locks the doors. Cassie and Ben climb inside the sofa and Julia hands them the flare gun and takes a knife and goes to the bathroom, and the man forces his way through the door and moves through the yacht taking food and searching room by room until he reaches the bathroom, and Julia slips out through a hole in the wall, while he looks inside, and she starts working her way around the outside of the boat to get back in through a broken window on the roof, and the dog finds her before she gets there and knocks her down, and Julia kills it with the knife, and the man comes out and finds the animal and the grief that moves through him drops him to his knees. Julia uses that moment to climb back up, but the man recovers faster than expected and gets to the roof first and hits her hard enough to knock her down, and she grabs onto whatever she can reach while he tries to drag her away and wraps his hands around her throat, and the children have been watching all of it from their hiding spot, and Cassie cannot take any more and comes out and fires the flare gun directly into the man, and he catches fire and the flames spread through the yacht immediately and the kids run out, and Julia goes back in to kick the burning man and grab the map with No's coordinates and their bags, and outside Ben and Cassie are beside Tom's body and Julia joins them and the 3 of them say goodbye. And then the burning man walks out of the wreckage and the family runs, and behind them the yacht blows apart. They walk until they find a small waterfall and stop to rest, and Cassie mentions quietly that the man might have found them because of Ben's balloons, and Ben goes pale, and Julia tells him firmly it was not his fault and gets everyone moving because the man is still somewhere behind them, and at a shallow pond Ben stops to stare at a hammerhead shark lying dead on the ground, and Julia spots the man coming in the distance and tells everyone to run, and they go down a slope and carefully navigate around a field of toxic waste barrels that came up from the seafloor. And when they finally lose sight of him they slow down and keep moving through a landscape that looks exactly like the bottom of the ocean because that is exactly what it is, dead sea creatures and decades of plastic waste and the remains of things that were never meant to see daylight. Ben starts slowing down and Julia looks at him and sees the dehydration already setting in, and she reaches for the water bottle and finds it almost empty, and Cassie admits she probably did not close it properly and Julia snaps at her because they cannot afford that mistake out here. And Cassie snaps back and says it does not matter because they are not going to survive anyway. And the argument gets loud and raw before they finally stop and keep walking in silence. They find a crashed passenger plane half buried in the ground and something moves inside and the family decides to spend the night inside where it is sheltered. Julia finds a family photograph in Tom's jacket pocket and has to hold herself together, and Cassie asks her to tell the story of how she and Tom met. And Julia tells her about the day Tom showed up at the hospital where she worked as a patient and then came back with flowers and a poem, and the 3 of them sit with that in the dark. In the middle of the night Cassie goes outside and the man comes at her from behind out of the darkness and Julia is on him before he can reach her daughter, stabbing him with everything that has been building since he drove that harpoon into Tom, and Cassie has to hold her and pull her away until she stops. In the morning the body is already covered in bites and they realize something in the area has been feeding. And a few hours later Ben walks past where Julia tells him to stop and plunges his face into a pond to drink and Julia pulls him back fast and explains that unknown water down here could carry anything, and they cover their heads against the heat and keep moving. And when Ben starts to stumble they find a cluster of old chairs and build a basic shelter and Julia gives him a medicine injection from the supplies and they rest through the night. Just before dawn a sound wakes Julia and she goes outside and finds a swarm of crabs moving across the ground toward them, and she runs back and gets the kids up and they sprint toward a massive cargo ship sitting grounded nearby, and 3 crew members are alive on board and one of the women wants to help them but the 2 men refuse and lock themselves inside a container, and the crabs reach the ship, and Julia gets the children climbing up the outside of the container and as she follows the crabs reach her leg and start pulling and Cassie and Ben grab her arms and drag her up before she goes down, The crabs find a hole in the container wall and pour through, and the crew members open fire, but there are too many and 2 workers are overwhelmed and killed, and the last man reaches a gap in the ceiling and the crabs pull him down too, and Julia bandages her leg and loses consciousness. She wakes in a sandstorm alone and grabs the dead crew member's weapon and climbs down calling for the children, and Cassie's voice comes back through the wind and appears and explains they went to look for help and found nothing, and Ben calls from nearby and leads them to an open container where they wait out the storm, and Julia takes Tom's lighter and burns the crab wounds on her leg closed and the pain cuts straight through her, but she does not stop. When the storm clears they find water bottles in another container and a radio and a gun, and Julia gets No on the radio and tells him she lost the map, and No tells her the submarine has been under attack from deep-sea creatures that the changed conditions have driven up from the abyss and into the open, and he tells her to move now because the sea is coming back faster than he calculated and they only have hours, and he fires a flare into the sky and the family walks toward it. After a long walk they can finally see the submarine across a wide field of rock formations, but reaching it means cutting through a narrow passage with stone walls on both sides, and halfway through the ground shifts and a rockslide builds and Julia shoves the kids clear and pulls back herself, and when the dust settles a wall of fallen rock is between them with the children on one side and Julia on the other, and Julia tells them through the stone to keep going, and Cassie refuses, and they argue through the rock until Julia promises she will find a way around and meet them there, and Cassie finally takes Ben and moves. The kids reach the submarine and find No outside bleeding against the hull, and he tells them it is over for him and they should take the vessel, and Cassie turns immediately and runs back for her mother because there is now room for all 3 of them. Julia is being chased through the rocks by the crabs and firing as she goes and the swarm is too large to hold back, and then Cassie appears on top of the rock wall above her and reaches down, and Julia climbs with her wounded leg and Cassie pulls and they get over and run together to the submarine, and Ben is already on the roof firing down at the crabs to buy them time, and they reach the hatch and looks out through the small windows at the crabs covering every surface of the submarine, and then the ocean comes back, the ground shaking first and then the water hitting the hull and then the full force of it throwing the submarine in every direction, and Julia is flooded with everything that happened and Cassie is sick and the high-pitched sound returns and the pressure of it takes all 3 of them under. When Julia opens her eyes the submarine is still and the children are breathing beside her, and they unlock the hatch and climb out into open air and find themselves in the middle of a destroyed city, buildings collapsed and streets flooded and the whole world completely changed, but they are standing in it, all 3 of them, and somewhere in what is left there is still the possibility of what comes next. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video like this.